everyone, and welcome to my channel, Babbling Books. If it's your first time here, my name is Elaine. So this is going to be my June wrap-up. I read 8 books in June, 4 I listened to on audio, and 4 I have physical copies of. 7 of them were YA, and 1 was an adult general fiction. And I had a really good reading month. I actually enjoyed the majority of what I read, and that's kind of continuing into July, which I'm really thrilled about. So to get started, we have The Best Kind of Magic. So this is book 1 of the Windy City Magic series by Crystal Cestari. This was a bit of a flop for me. It is a YA book, and it focuses on a teenage girl named Amber. In this world, magic exists. It's a regular world, except with magic. All people sort of know about it, but at the same time, the magical people sort of rely on the muggles being skeptical, and there's no fear of, witch hunters or anything like that. But Amber, she has sort of an odd power, and her power is the ability to tell who a person's true love is. And to be honest with you, that's about all I remember. I listened to this on audio, but it just was okay. It was one of the first things that I read, and I don't remember hardly any details. I remember being entertained, but I didn't really love a particular character, so there was really nothing to draw me to the second book. So I ended up giving it a 3-star. There was nothing wrong with it. I just didn't think it was great, and I don't really have an interest in continuing the series. But, it could be something that somebody else could love. And then after that, I listened to The Good Girls by Clare Eliza Bartlett. And I really enjoyed this one. So you have 4 girls known as the troublemaker, the overachiever, the cheer captain, and the dead girl. So there is a lot of stuff going on in this book. You have the 4 main characters, and you have their points of view. But the problem is that as you're reading the book, there are flashbacks, the current timeline, and then each main character, pulls other people into the story through flashbacks and through their current friends, family, and love interests. And the story starts getting incredibly complicated. The plot gets incredibly complicated because they go back into the past, pull things that happened from the past into the future. And then there's police interviews about what happened to the dead girl. And you slowly start to piece together this very intricate puzzle to find out what's true, what's not true, what happened, what didn't happen, who committed a murder, who didn't commit the murder. Secrets are revealed. And like I said, it's really complicated, but it was very good. My only complaint is the author totally overwrote this book. The dialogue is overly complicated. When the girls are being interviewed by the police, it sounds like they are reading from a script, which was very jarring because it sounded forced, or like they had rehearsed what they were going to say, which that was never brought up. So I really think that the writing could have been a little bit more straightforward, a little bit more simplified, but it was still an enjoyable read. And I do recommend it, and I would read more books by this author. And I do wonder if maybe if I had read a physical copy of the book instead, that maybe I wouldn't have found the book so complicated. But I don't think so. And then we have the one non-YA book, and that is All the Ugly and Wonderful Things by Bryn Greenwood. I loved this. This is my favorite book of last month. But it centers around a very taboo topic, really. So you have Wavy and Kellen. Wavy is a little girl when the story starts. She's a very neglected child. Sometimes she's physically abused. And she meets a young man named Kellen. And Kellen is very taken with Wavy, but in a very protective way. And he begins to take an interest in her life and make sure that she has shoes and clothes and that she's being fed, and tries to protect her from her parents, especially her stepfather. Her stepfather is the head of like a meth organization in this very small town rural area. And sometimes he will smack Wavy around. He doesn't like her very much. And then as Wavy gets older, she and Kellen develop a very intense friendship. But about the time Wavy is a young teenager, she starts to develop romantic feelings for Kellen, which makes things incredibly complicated. I don't want to do a spoiler, but I will say, to me, because a lot of other people that read this book, they felt that Kellen had been grooming Wavy, but I didn't see that. What I saw were two characters that were in incredibly complicated circumstances, very abnormal circumstances. They found each other and developed a support system because nobody else cared. The only person that cared about Kellen was Wavy, and nobody really cared about Wavy except Kellen. And that then developed as they got older. Well, the majority of the book takes place in the very late 70s, the early 80s. And so there are outside people, teachers, extended family, that are very concerned about this relationship. And so you just follow along. And the plot is Wavy and Kellen. There are other points of view. The entire book is from the third person. And I think this would be an excellent, excellent, excellent book for a book club. I think it would lead to some amazing discussions. I loved this. I would read more books by this author. And while there were times that I did feel a little bit disturbed, I could understand at the same time. So, trigger warnings for child abuse, for drug abuse. There was no child molestation, though as Wavy got older, she was not yet 18, and there are some, sexual encounters between her and Kellen. I don't want that to be a spoiler, but I do think that could very much be a trigger for some people. But I do recommend this, and if anybody's read it, I'd like to hear what you thought about it. I haven't come across anyone else who's read it, and I would be very interested in talking about it. So if you read this, let me know what you think, because I would really like to hear. And then I read Time Will Tell by Barry Lyga. This is a standalone YA. If you are not familiar with Barry Lyga, he wrote a trilogy called the Jasper Dent series. I think it's a trilogy. There actually may be 4 books. And Jasper Dent is the son of a serial killer. That's a fantastic series. I absolutely, absolutely love it. I recommend it all the time. So when I came across this, I had to get it. And as I said, this is a standalone. Okay, so you have to pay close attention if you want to know the plot of this book, because it sounds so complicated. It's actually very hard to explain. So you have 4 teenagers in a current timeline. They find out that their parents made a time capsule and buried it back in the 1980s, and they decide to dig it up. And when they dig it up, they find a bloody knife and a note that says, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to kill anyone." So now they're wondering which one of their parents is a murderer and who they murdered. Whether or not all of the parents know, or most of them in the dark, you have no idea. The parents are no longer close friends, but back in the 1980s, they were. So you also have a past timeline from the perspective of the parents when they were teenagers. You know their names in the 1980 timeline. You know the names of their children in the current timeline. But you don't know which child, teenager from the 1980s, which one of them grew up to have which child, if that makes sense. That sounds so complicated. Okay. Alea is one of the main characters in the current timeline. You know the identity of her father and her mother. But the other kids that she's friends with, you don't know their parents' names. So they're referred to as Liam's dad or the sheriff, Marcy's dad, Georgia's dad, Georgia's mom. But you don't know their names until the author finally tells you after you've done all this reading on the past timeline. And the reason he did that is because you are unable to take clues from the 1980s and apply it well to the current timeline, so you can't figure out who the murderer is. So I thought that was really cool, and I think that that really did bring my enjoyment of the book up. But in the beginning, it sucked the enjoyment out of the book because I was so focused on figuring out the identity of the parents that I think I missed a lot of enjoyment in the beginning of the book. So if you read this, do not try to figure out who the parents are until the author is ready to tell you. Or, I don't know, maybe you'll have fun with that. I found it to be stressful, and it was actually pissing me off. But I finally let it go and just read the book, and I wish I'd done that from the beginning. But good plot, interesting characters. I enjoyed the dual timelines. I did not see the ending coming, which is always fantastic when you read this kind of a book. I do recommend it. I like this author's other series better. But, you may love this. So that is Time Will Tell by Barry Lyga. It was a decent read. And then I read book 1 of what I hope is going to be a very long series. This is called These Witches Don't Burn by Isabel Sterling. So this is a YA book. The main character is a girl named Hannah, and she's an elemental witch. She lives with her mom and dad in Salem, Massachusetts, and she is not allowed to use magic in front of regs, which is another word for muggles. She's not allowed to tell regs anything about witchcraft. That is very, very bad. And the Witches' Council is very strict about that. So Hannah, as I said, she's an elemental witch. She has an ex-girlfriend named Veronica, who is also an elemental witch. Hannah's best friend is a ballet dancer named Gemma. She is a reg. And then there's a love interest that shows up in the book named Morgan. So Hannah starts to suspect that there is a blood witch in town, and no one will believe her. And a bunch of things start happening. People get hurt. There's some people that get killed. And Hannah has decided that she's going to find the blood witch and present proof to her elders so that they can do something about it. There is a lot of representation in this book. There is a trans character, a bisexual character, gay characters, queer characters. And I did not feel that the author was using that as a plot device or trying to sell more books by using inclusion. It felt very natural and joyful to include all of these different people in the story because obviously the world is not made up of just straight people. And I loved the characters. I loved the plot. The world building, the magic building system is relatively simple, but it really fit the story. And I was very excited to read the next book. I have to lean out of the camera because once again, my book stack fell over. Excuse me. Okay. So the next book is This Coven Won't Break by Isabel Sterling. So, it's hard to talk about a sequel or a book farther in the series without spoilers. I enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed the first one. It was quite a bit different, but you get to know the characters more. You get to know a lot more about the magic systems and other types of witches. The first book mostly focused on elemental. This one has more about blood magic and caster magic. There are new characters introduced as well as old characters. And I very much recommend this, and I'm so hopeful that there's going to be a third book. Do you see this? I ordered this brand new from Amazon, and it came with a cover taped. Brand new, my left foot. Anyway, so I recommend this a lot. And if you want to make a recommendation to me about a YA book that focuses on witches, I would love to hear it. I love reading about witches, but I feel like I've run the gauntlet and I'm trying to find something new. So please make a recommendation. The last two books are books 1 and 2 of the Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. The first book is called The Raven Boys. And this is one of my all-time favorite YA series. I have read this, I want to say 2 other times, but this time I decided to listen to it on audio, and I'm really glad I did. So book 1 is the main character. There are actually 4 main characters. Blue is the daughter of a psychic, and she lives in a house with a bunch of other psychics, and it's a crazy, quirky group of people that she lives with, and there's a lot of hilarity. Like, she'll ask a question to one of the other psychics, and the psychic will say, well, how do I know? And Blue will say, are you a psychic or not? And, she'll walk in on someone knitting, and she'll be like, is that for you? And the psychic will hold it up and be like, I think so. So I had a lot of, little chuckles. But Blue herself is not a psychic. Her only power is the ability to amp up the power of other psychics. So one day, as she's amping up the power of another psychic, she sees the ghost of a boy. And she asks the aunt, I don't have any psychic ability. I don't see dead people. How come I can see this guy? And her aunt says, well, either he's your true love or you're going to kill him. That's the only reason a normal person would see a ghost. And this is not a spoiler, none of this is. Blue has been told her entire life that if she kisses her true love, he will die. So the other 3 characters are what are known as Raven Boys inside the town of Henrietta, Virginia. There is a private school for boys, and the other 3 main characters attend that school. You have Gansey, Ronan, Adam, and Noah. So there's 4 Raven Boys. And Blue ends up meeting them, and she's drawn into their quest to find a Welsh king that Gansey believes has been buried somewhere near or in Henrietta, Virginia. And I love their friendship. I love all of the characters. I love the plot. I think that the author writes beautifully. It's very lyrical, but humorous at the same time. I love her characterizations. I think she's just a wonderful author, and I would recommend this series to anyone. I enjoy book 1. I think book 2 is even better, and that is Dream Thieves is book 2. I also listened to that on audio in June. And I think the series just gets better with every additional book. It's a completed series now. But I very much recommend this. I could talk about it all day. I'm going to have to stop myself because we're coming up on 20 minutes. So anyway, if you want to make any YA recommendations to me, I would really appreciate it. I've been reading a lot of YA this summer, and I think I'm going to run out of books pretty soon. Anything with witches, anything with great friendships. I love where the main character is a bad person, a troublemaker, or a misunderstood rebel kind of a character. I love all of those. So yeah, please give me some recommendations for some good YA, because like I said, it's all I've been reading this summer with my kids home from school. It's really easy to, if I have to put the book down and I can't pick it up again until the next day or hours later, I'm able to pick up right where I left off pretty easily. So I'm going to focus on YA and try to read through all of the YA on my shelves. But I think I'm going to need about 4 or 5 more books this summer. So yeah, anyway, let me know if you've read any of these, what you thought of them. And that's it. Bye.